Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to do a quick mic check and then we'll get this stream started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer working on Lord of the Rings. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with this stream, this is our series of world design focused streams where we go through the landscape of Middle Earth in Lord of the Rings Online, talk about what goes into making it, and what goes into just thinking about building landscapes, building the world that so many of you love through the books and the movies and even this video game, bringing it to life in a way that is as faithful as we can be to the source material. For those of you that have never been in this stream before, this is a world design focused stream, so that means I'm going to be talking about what goes into making the landscapes here, the dungeons, a little bit of housing, and some light gameplay stuff today as well. What this is not is a stream that's focused on things like game systems. So I'm not going to be talking about class balance. I'm not going to be talking about things like lag. I'm not going to be, even though I'm in the Ettenmoors today, I'm not going to be talking about the nuances of balance and combat in PvP. We're going to take a look at the Ettenmoors region, and the Ettenmoors is kind of the last of the unexplored regions for this stream. We've hit every single region over the course of, I think, 3 years now. We've gone through every single region in the game, and I was holding out and holding out and holding out on the Ettenmoors. And then with the last stream, we hit that last non-Ettenmoors region. I was like, okay, well, I guess this is it. It is time to talk about the Ettenmoors. I know there's a lot of stuff that is exciting and interesting about the Ettenmoors, both as it is currently and what is being worked on. But that is not my place to talk about it because I'm not the designer behind those things. Orion is the designer who's primarily focused on that right now. So if you have any questions about what's coming up for the Ettenmoors, I would recommend checking out the various Discord channels that are associated with PvMP as well as what's on the forums for any conversations related to that. I unfortunately will not be able to answer any questions about what his plans are in this stream. So yeah, with that in mind, welcome everyone, and let's begin our stroll through the region. So the interesting thing about the Ettenmoors, it harkens back years and years and years and years ago as this feature where we had the license for Lord of the Rings. We knew that there would be an interest in some sort of PvMP or PvP gameplay, but the license really didn't, I don't want to say allow, but it didn't really feel like it had room to have kind of that classic, player versus player experience where you're going into a very specific arena and you're fighting other players, you're gathering up factions and going into war with each other. I think at the time we came out with this, the Dark Age of Camelot was probably the primary PvMP game, with aspects of World of Warcraft also starting starting up their PvP efforts. For Lord of the Rings, we didn't want to um, go that route as far as PvP goes because that didn't really fit the theme of what Middle Earth was about at the time that we were telling the story, right? It was about the conflicts of the world all aiming towards Mordor and Sauron, all of these different kingdoms and forces coming together and bringing the fight to Sauron. And that was kind of the linchpin there. It's like, okay, well, if every major kingdom, every major civilization in Middle Earth is moving against Sauron and starting the fight against Sauron, well, why don't we introduce a feature that lets you play as a minion of Sauron, so that we can have our PvP cake and eat it too. Um, so yeah, so that's where it kind of came from. It started out as a small little pet project. Honestly, I believe with Orion as the originator behind it and kind of the main impetus behind making it happen. And it evolved into its own features and own systems and own gameplay. Um, there have been attempts over the years to expand it by adding new maps and whatnot, but ultimately it feels like it comes down to people really just having this uh, near and dear nostalgia for the Ettenmoors when it comes to the PvMP gameplay. So, I think we've kind of stuck in and focused on that. So that's the background and the history for for what the Ettenmoors is. Like so many of our efforts in game, they kind of start out as little side projects and then they grow into something bigger and more substantial over time. And I think things like the housing system is another example of that kind of thing. But Ettenmoors is definitely that as well. It's its own little kind of ecosystem, its own little feature that is a labor of love for the people that have worked on it. It doesn't get much world design attention nowadays, mostly because of the balance implications of even moving a single rock, what moving even a single rock can have in tight PvP gameplay. But overall, it's kind of I feel like the Ettenmoors is a encapsulation of at least the landscape design of original Lotro. Like there's a lot of aspects of it that when you look at it, you're like, that's how Lotro was when the game first was made. Um, so we have here, where are we? Boop. So yeah, we're in Glandvreg now, which is the Free People's starting location for the Ettenmoors. And as you can see, like there are definitely a lot of older assets here. Again, it's in large part because this is a region that change is difficult to make in from a developer perspective, right? Like we want to not mess with things too much, at least from a structural perspective, because that can have problems that arise from that. It can swing the balance of the space. And you do definitely have a lot of these older assets here, some of which are, of an age where they are missing elements to them, elements to their design that we kind of take for granted in both in modern Lotro and in modern gaming in general. There are a lot of assets here that don't have normal maps, don't have spec maps, those sorts of things. Some of it is just because of the age of the assets, and some of it's intentional to try to make this region perform a little bit better when you're running around in it. Let me just there we go. Walked out here and I was like, this doesn't seem like it's loading out quite far enough, and for some reason my graphic settings were a little low. So as we start going in, I'll take a look at some of the questions we have. Hirok says, are we playing as a creep today? Nope, but like I said, I am soloing. I'm the only person on my server right now, so I guess that counts as soloing, I think. Biome-wise, the Ettenmoors was something where I think we tried to break it up into 3 or 4 distinct styles of landscape. You know, you have where we're walking through right now, which is very much a extension of the the Trollshaws biomes, right? You know what the Trollshaws looks like. You kind of get that look and feel here. So you know you've got the Trollshaws, you've got more of a pine forest down here in Hithlad. So the idea was, I think, to try to make sure that kind of each quadrant of the Ettenmoors kind of had its own flavor that was familiar from what you've played in and run around in other parts of the world. Um, kind of a not a crash course, but a quick tour of what you expect to see in general area door in comparison. Let me reflect shield is on. Okay. There I go, soloing those trees. Um, so Herrick says, any chance we see an extension of the Ettenmoors? If by extension of the Ettenmoors you mean more Ettenmoors or Ettenmoor, More, I think for the purposes of the Ettenmoors, it's going to stay its own little encapsulated space. There may be opportunities in the future through like fill in the gaps regions. So, for example, here we are. Here we're down here in Hithlad. Let me go to So like here we are kind of in the Ettenmoors. If there are ever regions of like Rudar that get completed, or if we ever decide to add more to the Trollshaws, um, there may be opportunities there to kind of bring in some of the flavor from the Ettenmoors, storylines from the Ettenmoors, or that are related to the Ettenmoors. But I wouldn't count on growing the physical footprint of the Ettenmoors all that much. Um, Calariel says, I've never even been to the Ettenmoors. It is kind of a little hidden bit. There are a couple of places that you can get to it. I know all of the original 3 starter locations do have travel routes to it, as well as Rivendell itself has access to it. It's not available on capped or like lower cap legendary worlds, because the way the Ettenmoors is generally balanced is it is intended to be a endgame PvP zone. So the intention is for you, your free people player, to be whatever is at level cap, and for the creeps, the servants of Sauron, for them to also be at a cap. Oh, those poor little hobbits. I remember when we were testing this, running around as a warg in here, ganking poor little hobbit NPCs. Um, and then there was one bug, I forget what the bug was, but it would cause the entire village to aggro on you. So I had an entire village of angry hobbits chasing after me, which was a little surprising. Was not expecting to be chased out of town by hobbits, but there we go. So Brandyman asks, will you be in the Moors on live server today? I do not typically run my my stroll streams on a live server. Sometimes some of the things I do on this server are not things that I should be doing in a production environment. So like if I have to adjust properties or if there's a crash or something, it's generally safer for me to not run any sort of stream that I'm doing on a live server unless the intention of that stream is very specifically for doing an event on a live server. So I've done like hide and seek games and whatnot. The tricky thing too about running on a live server is we have so many different live servers, and it's really hard to kind of balance and be fair to all of the servers. And it kind of takes a lot of work to go server to server to server, run an event, log out, do another event. Um, so we don't typically, or I don't typically, and I prefer not to run these sorts of things on live. It's just safer. Um, I might do something like on a boar sometime if we have need for specific testing and whatnot. But generally, uh, we do not run these live. But I'm going to capture this tower either way. Druid's Fire says, last time I actively ran through the moors, not counting using the Stable Master as a shortcut. I was a chicken last year. Mugzukili says, that is a nice outfit. Can you show a bit more? Yeah, so the outfit that I'm wearing right now is the cosmetic set from the Coffer of the Sands that just came out. I wanted something that looked cool. I don't usually run around. Usually don't run around in any sort of cosmetics when I am doing a stream, but I figured, hey, we're here for some PvMP, so why not look cool while I'm soloing PvMP. So Blossomberry asks, can you talk about the challenges of keeping the creeps from escaping? It's certainly a challenge. I would say the bigger challenge, we can put up walls pretty easily wherever we need to. So I would say, honestly, the bigger challenge when it comes to managing keeping PvP players, PvMP players, creeps, or even free peoples that are doing PvP in this space is more about keeping them out of spots within the region that they're not supposed to be getting. And I'm sure there are ample locations that have not been discovered yet, but every so often I will get a bug saying like, oh, there's a creep up on the hills behind Glan Vrig killing NPCs and farming them and whatnot. And the honest solution that I've employed for that has been to just put up smite volumes in the locations that have been reported, so that any player trying to get into those spaces, freep or creep, just falls over. They just fall over. That is usually the easiest way to handle it. As far as keeping them in the game or in the world, I think keeping them in we have a couple of ways to do that. We have our normal block map barriers. We also have just general physics walls that we can put up. So it's a combination of a couple of things to keep people in. There was, at one point, when we were trying to kind of get into the Chinese market, one of the requirements to be in the Chinese market for LOTRO was there was a desire for a greater emphasis on PvP in that space. Or PvP in general, like globally. So we did build some systems that would allow, with limited effort or limited access, creep players to get out into certain areas of the world and raid certain areas of the world. That was built specifically for that audience, and I believe that was a fairly short-lived effort. And so when you look at what's available now, like, we don't have that available for normal PvMP. So Imagor says, do you have experience in other PvP games before Ettenmoors? So I was not one of the designers working on this. Generally, I personally am not a big fan of PvP. I much prefer a more like casual or cooperative game experience myself. The people that built this were big fans of PvP, particularly coming either people that were fans of Dark Age of Camelot, or were former members of Mythic who had worked on Dark Age of Camelot in the past. So there was a pedigree associated with it. Any news about Osgiliath? I don't have anything I can speak to about that. Let's see what other questions we can tackle. Can you imagine? So Manadalair says, can you imagine the riots during this particular festival if suddenly it changed to nighttime, from nighttime to noon? I'm wondering what festival you're talking. If you're talking about the anniversary festival, and just my ability to change time. So the one thing to speak about that specifically, while I am able to change the time of day on a whim here on my local server, it's not actually changing the time of day on the server itself. It's just changing the point at which the day file is at. So if I set it to be midday, it's not telling the server it's midday now. It's just saying, hey, skip to the midday point of the day file. Hirok says, any chance we can get more stable masters offering a trip to the Ettenmoors? I mean, I feel like that is something that could be done if there was enough of a demand and request for it. It shouldn't be too difficult to do. But I would not be the one to undertake that under my own volition without kind of sign off and support from Orion and whatnot on that front. Basically, unless it is a very specific bug, I usually tend to stay out of the Ettenmoors. Again, because it's like it is a place that it doesn't want to be meddled with, right? Like it wants to kind of be how it is as much as it can possibly be how it is. Let's see. One person talking about how they wish they could use more post-processing effects, but it lags too much. Ponton Finberry says, is Burglar a class you play in your regular playtime or just for strolling Middle-earth? So Burglar is, at least on the internal clients, it is the default class for when you're creating a character. I don't remember if it is for anything else, but it's the default. So human, male, Burglar is the default that automatically goes to. So usually when I need to create a character to go in and test on a server, I'm not really caring too much about the class that I'm playing or the appearance of my character. I am just like, I need to create a character, I need to get in game, go in with the defaults. So that is how I pick what I pick when I'm doing these streams. As far as my regular playtime goes, I started playing the game as a Burglar. During alpha and beta, I was really, really enjoying playing a Burglar. When I was on my break from working at Turbine and was doing project management stuff at other companies, I kind of took a pause from playing LOTRO. But when I came back, I was a little bit lost with my Burglar. So I decided to pick up and play through the game with a Guardian, and a friend of mine played through with Runekeeper. So it was Guardian Runekeeper duo all the way up to the then cap at Minas Morgul. That friend got busy and ended up not being able to play as much anymore. So then I re-rolled a Bjorning, and right now my main, as I'm playing on live, is a Bjorning. Let's see. So I do want to mention again, I see lots of questions in here asking about gameplay elements being added to or changed within the Ettenmoors. I am not going to be able to answer any of those questions for you outside of even the bare vaguest of generalities as far as those answers go, because I'm here to focus on the landscape. As you can see here, we're running through more Trollshaws-esque landscapes, for example. Um, this feature, the Ettenmoors as a feature, is something that outside of, like I said, bug fixing, not really in my purview to address any changes for it. Um, it's generally safer that way. People got mad at me when I remove a rock that they like. I can't imagine how mad they would get at me if I completely changed the scene files in a region because it messed up the flow of combat, for example. um, so a lot of people managed to get out of the map in the Ettenmoors. Have you fixed this yet? I can't fix what I don't know. So if there are spots where players are able to do that, I need bug reports for that. And I know that's not going to be popular to hear, but if there are places that people can do that, please, please, please file bugs on it so that we can look into and address these issues. Alrighty, let's see. I'll get a good view and then see what I can do to answer a few more questions. This is actually a really nice view of the Ettenmoors from up here. All right. The Moors, so Brandyman says, the Moors don't get as much attention as it deserves. It feels abandoned. Often with the Freep updates, it's left unbalanced for many, many months. And there's still a lot of small bugs that cause big problems that are just ignored. I know this is not something you personally can handle, but as a player, it's like the ones who work on it on the Moors don't do much for us. We are a small team, so that makes it hard for us to be able to address big issues, or not even say big issues, but a multitude of issues, particularly in a space like the Ettenmoors where changes have to be incredibly thoughtful and fixes aren't always able to be done as quickly as the player base might like. Um, so while I'm sorry that there are issues that might be present in this space that players feel are not getting the attention as quickly as they would like. Our team is not a team that is scaled up enough to be able to always be able to quickly jump at and affect change on everything because we still have our ongoing gameplay stuff that we have to work on, our ongoing region development, ongoing instance development, festivals, like everything. And so it's really hard to be able to do something for everyone. Certainly the people that are working on it are very affectionate of the Ettenmoors and are doing the best they can to address those concerns within the time that they have available to work on those things. It's kind of like, everyone's always clamoring for more housing neighborhoods from me. Like, oh, I want this place and I want that place. And it's great that there's that passion around it, but I'm also only one person and I can only do so much. And it's the same for the people that are working on the Ettenmoors, right? They have their own priorities and their own direction that they have to find a way to work in changes to the Ettenmoors around. I know that's not probably going to be a very satisfying response to that kind of comment, but the reality is we are working we strive to do the best we can with the resources that we have to do that work. All right, don't mind me. I'm just going to run through an enemy camp and just reflect shield everything. Whee! The knockback there has been for a while one of the biggest, not even just in the Ettenmoors, but in general landscape itself. Knockback is always something when it's done out in the wilds that is very, very tricky to manage, because I think there were bugs in the Misty Mountains years ago, and there probably still are, but one in particular that I was made aware of where people were using the knockbacks from the trolls in the Misty Mountains to pop them up on top of like rocks that they weren't supposed to get up on, and then use that knockback effect, putting them up there as a way to then get outside of playable space. So knockback on open landscape is always potentially risky. All right. Let's see as we continue on. Not Ettenmoors' question, but are the team aware of Fellowship raid player effects cause massive PC lag? So some of it's visual, some of it's systemic. I know one of the things that is regularly being looked at and worked on is finding ways to, programmatically reduce the weight that those things have on players. And I think one of the things that we've really put a lot of attention and focus on, especially over the last couple of years, is, I think for a while, when people thought about performance in game, it was very much couched around visual performance. What's the frame rate in this area? How much visually are we pushing that's causing poor frame rate? And now with how powerful home PCs are and hardware in general, and how generationally each new video card that comes out is stronger and stronger and better, looking more at where the server issues are, what skill effects are causing issues, how our UI can cause issues, how even just like player play patterns can cause issues. So it's been really interesting seeing this change in thought process regarding performance over the last couple of years, because, like I said, it was previously very very client perf focused for a very long time, for much of the game. Like the amount of time we spent prior to the launch of the game, figuring out what our min spec was and what our frame rate minimums for areas was going to be. The amount of time we spent on that was wild in comparison. And now we're looking more closely at, okay, what are we doing on the server? Are there too many objects on, too many entities in a land block that's causing performance issues in the server? Are there certain skills that are causing performance issues? Is how, player data is being loaded and unloaded causing issues? So those sorts of things are where, a lot of our attention is being focused when it comes to looking at performance. And it is not a quick fix. It is not a single thing that we can do that is going to magically improve performance on everything. But it's certainly putting us in the right direction to solve those issues. So since I'm here, I want to talk a little bit about the region that we're actually in. This is the Eisendeep. This is an area that was built as a landscape cave prior to us having access to the dual height map tech. And one of the things that I look at when I see this that would be like, I would feel like it would be really interesting to try to do is remake something like this using dual height map tech. Again, we probably would never do something like that for this, but there are certainly areas in the world where we have built these landscape cave interiors with objects for the ceiling as opposed to the height mesh as a ceiling. And it would be really interesting to kind of take and refresh those, if we ever had time. All right, let's see if there are any other questions. Jairus asks, will we ever bring back the delving of Frore and the cave network in the Ettenmoors? That I can't speak to. That is an Orion question. I know there are certainly pros and cons to it. I think one of the biggest things to think about is how well it would perform when you're actually in that space. All right, let's see. Oh, it's drink time. Thank you for reminding me. I'm slowly catching up on all the chat, everyone. Um, but um, but yeah, so it's really interesting kind of running around in this region and certainly seeing these like older style landscapes that, I think they certainly have a 2007 charm to them that if we were to produce something now, um, we would not likely build them in the same way. Even things like these random like spikes of land and whatnot, which are like they are very much a byproduct of how we used to world build. The mashed potato landscapes, as it was or as it were. Um, this dale is really nice too. I like just the flow of it. Sometimes it's hard to get, using the tools we have now, sometimes it is hard to get a good kind of like smooth flowing veil in the way that this is set up. A good smooth brush on the landscape will do that, but it can be a little tricky to like get something that feels like that. Particularly if you have a purpose behind building that veil, like if you have a valley that you need to put into place. Um, Glad to see that some of the landscape issues that were reported here have gotten fixed. Um, there was some bleed over in region work that was happening nearby that was causing terrain textures to show up here that weren't supposed to be here, but I think we went through and cleared most of them up. So Critican says, how would you describe the Ettenmoors for someone not overly familiar with it, and what was the theme the designer went for in this zone? So I touched on it briefly at the beginning. The Ettenmoors is the dedicated player versus player region for Lord of the Rings Online. This is where you go if you want to participate in PvP. It will be your free people character, so your primary main character, or a special creep character, an evil character that is rolled up specifically and only for playing in this region. Um, that is the high level gist of it. Lots of territory control, area control, and PvP conflict. From a more narrative perspective, the Ettenmoors is kind of a pocket of landscape that was formerly controlled by the Kingdom of Rudar, with little bits and pieces of dwarf and elf influence in it as well, because we have Mount Graham up there in the distance, looming, which was a former dwarf stronghold, which also now is a warren for the goblins of Graham, the Mount Graham goblins. Um, so it's got a lot of history behind it. Most of the orc armies and whatnot you see here hail from Angmar as they are working to invade and push further south. All right. So there was a comment about where someone could talk with Orion. So next week, this is interesting, a little funny. So normally our streaming schedule, I do my Casual Stroll, which you're watching right now, on the first Wednesday of every month. And then on the second Thursday of every month, we do the We Have a Cave Troll stream, which is Orion and myself just hanging out and generally talking about whatever topics are interesting and compelling to us. Last time we had a special guest, MVP, that's their username on the forums, to talk about festivals and what goes into making festivals and what makes festivals interesting and fun. So this month, tomorrow is actually the second Thursday of the month, but because of timing for a stream now and the fact that Penny Arcade Expo is happening this week, we decided to push the We Have a Cave Troll stream until next Thursday. So it'll be technically the third Thursday of the month. But so that is a great spot where you can go and speak with Orion if you have specific questions for him. I would say that is where you can look. Alrighty. Manadler says, a gram goblin, you'll need a lot of those to make a kilo. You'd be surprised, some of those goblins are pretty heavy. You know, all those bombs lifted up over their heads, they're working out some muscle there. Alright. And we're through. Oh, I didn't go through all of that. I just kind of straight walked through. Oh, and I cleared out my inventory, so I don't have my rocket pack anymore. Alright. Slow roll we go. So there we have the Ettenmoors. One of the things that I remember when we were first started working on this, because a lot of the terrain in Eriador specifically is originally something that was a part of what was called Middle Earth Online, which is the predecessor to Lord of the Rings Online, which many of us worked on as well. And so a lot of the terrain that you see in Lotro, while there's nothing that is originally still, anything playable that is originally from Mio, a lot of it has its origins in that. I think the original Mio was intended to cover everything in Eriador, right? Like all the way from Grey Havens to Misty Mountains. Everything in Eriador was fair game, and that was big and ambitious. But one of the things that is interesting is a lot of these kind of mountain forms and the locations of where these things are in Lotro are the same places, and in some circumstances the same terrain that existed in Mio. And the area that we're at right now, in the Ettenmoors, while it has been sculpted since, there was a lot of Mio stuff going on, and in the areas surrounding it, there's still a lot of that old Mio terrain that exists. And one of those things is Mount Graham. I remember very early on when I first joined the team as a production artist for Middle Earth Online, I was doing a lot of work on dwarf structures and dwarf motifs and decorations and whatnot, and people were talking about doing a test within the Mount Graham dungeon spaces. And so I remember teleporting near here and looking at it in World Builder and honestly being very impressed with the silhouette of Mount Graham. And I think it still holds up as just this impressive spike of a mountain. I think there are certainly aspects of this that were we to work on it more in modern times would probably be a little less extreme, but it's still just a very impressive monolith to look at from a distance, and it does a really effective job of wayfinding you through the region because you can just look for that corner and kind of know where you are in relation to it throughout the rest of the region. Brandyman says, could you please answer my question from earlier? When you passed an elf camp before, it was much smaller with less NPCs and in a different position. I don't know what the state of various camps and whatnot are as far as what's being worked on, what their status is. So I'm not able to answer that question for you. I am not someone who is very deeply aware of all of the things that are being done by Game Systems and by Orion in this space. So if you have questions about those sorts of things, I would say your best bet is to try to find an opportunity to speak with Orion about them. Meckenbaugh says, I'm glad you at least changed the name. I'd be embarrassed to say Mio. No, not that drink enhancer. See, my mind when I think of Mio is less about the drink enhancer and more like Super Troopers, just Are you talking to me, Meow? Meow? Um, uh, Cricticran says, that is an impressive mountain. I agree. It has that aggressive, imposing presence and an easy to identify landmark. Yep. And, I think one of the things that is kind of tricky when you're building a game like this, too, is like, where do you exaggerate? Where do you exaggerate in the shapes and forms that you're building on the landscape? I think exaggeration is great for things in the far distance. Like, you get this strong, exaggerated, spiky silhouette along the mountain ranges. And that does a really great job of telling the story of like this is as far as you go, right? Like this is the depth at which you can go for this space. Um, it's when that kind of exaggeration is happening in near play that it gets kind of like a little goofy. And I think there are definitely some areas that we have in the game world now where when that exaggeration exists, it doesn't feel all that great to run around in it. Um, things like hello you and you. Um, Even things like going around in the troll shaws and the valleys in the troll shaws, because they are both so steep but also so smoothed, it feels a little weird to walk around in those. I think they need a little bit of architected like hardness and whatnot um, in order to feel like they fit, like they belong in that space. Um, I think we've gotten a lot of great rock assets over the last few years, and I think we're gonna try to pull back on using them as aggressively as we have been, but I think those shape forms really do help us take the limitations of our terrain, which is basically a flat mesh that billows effectively. Take those limitations and use the rocks to supplement and give those softer forms a more hard edge where that hard edge is needed. So Cryptocan says, will you do something similar in future content, creating striking landmarks in locations that make them more noticeable in a zone? That is usually always our goal. Whenever we are building, building things, we always want to make sure that we have wayfinding opportunities. When I built the original Swan Fleet, one of our other designers kind of ran through it and did a little bit of like a tour through it to specifically look for places where it's like, oh, if we raised this up just a little bit more, it would give you a great vantage point of the rest of the map, like that sort of thing. So that sort of stuff is something that we are always looking at and considering when it comes to building our regions. Using the landscape as a storytelling tool is something that's really important. I've mentioned before, like it's one thing to have the rolling hills, but then if you can add in certain terrain painting kind of within the hills itself to suggest a path or a road that when players look at it, their eyes kind of go towards it and follow towards it. That is really like one of the goals of a world designer, right? We want to tell a story through the landscape without needing words to do that. And so that is what we hope to achieve with anything that we build. Eros216 says, remember, you did say that the Troll Shaws was your least favorite place to work in anymore. That is true. Those of you that are unfamiliar, I think I've built the Troll Shaws 4 times at this point. The original Troll Shaws, and then there was the Extreme Troll Shaws, some additions there. On top of that, we had a ill-fated prototype region. That was the Troll Shaws, and then we came back to it for the Angle, and that's not counting any of the additional, reworks that I've had to do in those spaces. So Trollshaws is definitely a region that I would be happy to not be working in anymore if I can avoid it. All right. Well, let's go up here. Maybe I'll go capture this one. How does that sound? We'll run back through here, capture this. Kriktakan says, "Oh, I remember Swanfleet, Cariskelebrin, and Tharbad were very memorable, along with the tents of Langaren in the distance." I feel like for me, Swanfleet and Cardelon kind of are my peak when it comes to world design. I think, it is they're the regions that if I look at them and I feel the most proud having built them, because I feel like they were excellent showcases for the direction that we wanted to take landscape going forward, and also how showing off how big we can make a region. Um, you know, and I think that was one of the things. What am I doing? What's going on? Here, we're just going to do this. Oh, there we go. We're just going to capture this now. Boop. Go us. But yeah, like I think those regions were things that I was very proud of because they acted as um, they were very much a culmination of a lot of the work that I'd been doing for several years on Lotro to kind of advance how we build landscapes, improve our process, improve our ability to create spaces quicker and bigger. And I think Swanfleet and Cardelon really were a showcase for that. This isn't to say I'm not proud of the other work that I've done since then, but particularly the traversal of those regions are something that I think was very successful, and I want to continue with going forward, at least in the landscapes I build. So Herok says, "What was for landscape? What was the choice to bring out 4 big areas in Legacy of Morgoth instead of smaller zones throughout this year? Is it easier to produce all at once?" I think there's a combination of things. Whenever we're building an expansion pack, there's always this worry about competing with our prior expansion packs, right? Like looking at what we've built before and thinking to ourselves, like, okay, does this match or meet the standard that we've set in other products, in other releases? I think Mordor had been for a very, very long time kind of our staple. This is what we compare ourselves to. Mordor is the region effort that, in terms of amount of landscape, number of quests, etc. After that, it's more about, what can our team accomplish? Does our team have the availability to fill those spaces? And what makes sense in terms of our publishing direction, our monetization direction, and whatnot? I think we're also always, well, I don't want to say always, but the last few years we've had some staff turnover occur during like critical points in expansion pack development where other people have gotten really awesome jobs for themselves finding new opportunities, and we don't want to begrudge them those. But that does also kind of leave us in a little bit of a lurch trying to figure out like, okay, how do we change what we're working on to now be able to support what our current staffing availability is. So yeah, that's a long-winded way to say like there are various reasons why we do what we do and choose what we choose to make as far as regions go. I would love to be able to get us in a position where we could have a smaller landscape update or two throughout the year. I think this year we weren't able to do that in large part because we had a new team that was kind of a fresh a fresh team for the expansion pack, and we kind of needed a little bit of a both of a break to recover from building Legacy of Morgoth, and also to just like see where everyone was, what everyone wants to do. Um, I'm still committed at some point to having that Moria alternative. When that's going to happen, that really depends on how far along I get on my lab weeks post expansion pack. So, um, let's see. Eros216 says they both feel more exploratory, and that was part of the intention with what we did in Swanfleet and Cardalon, and to some degree what we were doing with Legacy of Morgoth's landscapes. Each of those regions, we kind of went into it with the concept of like core gameplay on the landscape and then exploration gameplay. I don't think we quite have all the systems we want in place, and I'm hoping over the summer to be able to spend a little bit more time playing with some landscape systems to make explorable landscape a little bit more interesting and feel a little bit more detailed. Um, but the idea behind Amberol, Kudzagin, Imular, and Ureshtar was to have these kind of highways of content going through it, but also be okay with having these larger expanses beyond what the core playable sections were going to be. Critican says, absolutely, when I saw Karanost upon entering Cardalan, it was the most impressive thing I've seen. I absolutely wanted to explore it. Karanost was something that I was really excited about because we had just gotten that revamped Arnorian ruin set. The artist that did that, he wanted to just, he didn't rebuild it, but he did a ton of retexturing work to make it a little bit more flexible and modular and easier for us to make variants of if we needed to in the future. Because the prior version was just like so many different textures, so many different individual pieces. So the intention with Karanost was to take the work that he had done and really try to use it to build what could have been a castle or a keep in a way that made sense, as opposed to how we had been using those assets in the past, which were just kind of like goofy, haphazard placement everywhere. So that is, that is something too that I'm striving for as we continue on with development, is trying to make what we're doing structurally make sense, how we're building structurally make sense. Because I think we've all matured as gamers and designers, and just the idea of like taking a building and jamming it into a cliff and calling it a day isn't ultimately what I think us collectively want out of a more mature, grounded fantasy game. Old Time Lotro player asks, did he say anything about Elf Premium Homes? Not sure if he was taking any questions. So we don't have any new news for Rivendell housing yet. It's still something that is being worked on right now. One of our artists is going through the structures that we're using for the exteriors, and kind of looking at rehabbing those, giving them a rework similar to what was done for those Arnorian structures that I was talking about before, so that they look a bit nicer, and also giving them kind of a facelift to help differentiate them from what is being used in the Falathorn homestead. And from there, we'll take what he's done and try to incorporate that into the interiors as well. It is tricky trying to build something like a housing neighborhood in tandem with also working on expansion pack stuff. The designer who's building that neighborhood right now does have to kind of focus on working on expansion pack stuff for the time being. But once those landscapes are done, he'll be back on working on that. So hopefully that is a good enough answer for that. So Imagor says, IMO, Yondershire, Cardalon, and Swanfleet was way too big. Decreases their size to 30%. Don't hurt anything and make them more fun. Too much empty space with nothing of interest is some parts of the location. I think that is the challenge, because for everyone with the opinion that you have on that, there are also other people that are always going to be like, give me more empty. Give me more spaces that I can go and roam and explore. And if there are random, ruins here and there, and that's it, that's great for me, because that allows me to come up with my own stories for the space. So there's definitely arguments on both sides of there. I think a lot of what we do, at least from the world design perspective, people come to LOTRO for the world, and we want to be able to provide them that world, and provide them space where they're not always feeling like the pressure of questing is always on them. Let them find those cozy spaces that are off and out of the way to just chill out and do what they want to do in those spaces. As someone else said in there, I'm team give me more empty. I think there's certainly challenges at lower levels in terms of traversal. So Swanfleet, Cardalon, and Yondershire, I think, to a lesser extent. But Swanfleet and Cardalon, certainly, they're very big regions, and that's part of why we made the decision early on to have that little something extra quest to get you your first mount pretty early on, because we knew these regions were going to be big. And mounts are a crucial part of your game experience anyways. So it's really important to have those there and have them available sooner. And it just a happy accident, I guess. Maybe not accident being the right word, but having those regions be that big just kind of further helped underscore that intention. So we are just past 3 o'clock now, so I'll go through a couple questions here, and then we'll wrap it up for the night, for the afternoon, rather. Gouger says, those empty spaces could be great places for secret quests, like the Secret Stone quest in Erebor. Secret quests are always a interesting thing to observe among the player base. Oh wow, this looks... There's a lot of farmers here. Secret quests are something interesting to observe, because there are certainly some people that really enjoy them. There are others that are very frustrated by them because they don't stem out of a hub to find. So there's something that you have to stumble across while you're exploring. And for completionists in particular, that kind of gameplay experience can be very vexing. It's like, oh, I didn't know this was here because the quest hub didn't give me a direction here, and I'm like missing that one quest. Where is that one quest? It's not easy to find. So there's pros and cons to it. Like I think found content can be interesting, as long as that found content is not a requirement for things like deed completion. Or rather, it's a supplement for deed completion, right? Like if you stumble across the found quest while you are in the process of doing other quests, and that just means that you've finished your questing deed one quest sooner than you would have if you just stuck with the hub quest. I think that's where they're interesting. And then I'll answer Edrigar's last question as well, and then we'll wrap it up for the night. So Edrigar says, one question, please. Will there be kinship houses in the Rivendell neighborhood? Yes, there will be a kinship house in the neighborhood. The neighborhood is going to consist of 2 simple houses, 4 deluxe houses, and 1 kinship house. We're not doing any like special chaser properties like we have in the past couple. So all of the houses of a given type are going to have feature parity. The biggest difference is going to be just where they're situated, where they're looking out, what view you're getting from those houses. So All right. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with me and taking a tour of the Ettenmoors. We'll wrap this up with a view of Mount Graham in the distance. Again, we're talking about that very aggressive silhouette out there, but it certainly lets you know where you are in the world. So as far as things that are coming up, this week is PAX. So we are doing a player gathering on Friday afternoon. I'm not sure if there are any more open spots in it, but if you're in the area and there are open spots, please make sure to register for that. Next week, we have a Cave Troll stream. We're still finalizing what our topic is going to be, but one of the thoughts we had was to actually talk about things like player gathering and player interaction. So with that in mind, thank you everyone for hanging out, answering or asking your questions, and taking a tour through this last unexplored region of Middle Earth as far as the Casual Stroll streams go. This isn't the last of the Casual Stroll streams, though. Next one, we're going to come up. They're going to be more thematic based as opposed to region based. And I'm thinking the next one, I kind of want to go East-West Road. I think we'll start in Ered Luin and we will just follow the roads east and see how far it takes us. Maybe we'll get all the way to Ironfold as part of that. But thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great week. If you're going to PAX, have a great PAX. And if you're coming to the player gathering, we'll see you there on Friday. Have a good one, everyone.